This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have a fantasy football industry legend from Dynasty League Football. It's the one and only Ryan McDowell. Welcome to the show, Commish.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kev. Excited to be here and chat all things fantasy with you.
Let's do it. So for the listeners, the viewers that may be unfamiliar with your work in fantasy football and with DLF, what is DLF and what is your role over there?
Yeah, sure. DLF, Dynasty League Football, obviously dynasty fantasy football site that was started, we're getting close to 20 years, back in 2006 by three guys. I was not involved in starting the site. Some people think that, but I don't deserve credit for that one, unfortunately. But the three fellows started it. A few years later, brought in Eric Dickens, who a lot of people might know, still certainly in the space. And then a couple of years after that, I joined the team as a writer, and honestly, just kind of worked my way up until I was granted a partial ownership role. And we eventually sold DLF. There were five of us that had some ownership stake at one point. So we've sold, but I still work for DLF. I'm a writer, podcaster, ranker, collect ADP every single month. So I still certainly have a busy role over there at DLF.
For sure. So from like a consumer perspective, what are your favorite tools and features that come from DLF?
Obviously the ADP, I'm a little biased with that one. Again, I've been collecting that monthly data for over 10 years now. So that's a big one for me. But we've got other tools that incorporate that ADP and incorporate other, value metrics, our Dynasty Trade Analyzer. There's a lot of trade tools out there, but again, I'm biased. I think ours is the best, and we stand behind what we have there. And we've actually just recently released a Dynasty League Analyzer. So not only analyzing a specific trade, but your entire team and the rest of the teams in your league as well.
Nice. And I saw that there was a recent release of the draft guide. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a new one. Again, everybody has a draft guide, but we like what we offer as far as analysis and some of that data. And I mean, the best part there is if you're already a subscriber at DLF, that's free. No additional cost associated with that. So if you're a DLF sub, check that out. And if you're not, jump in there and it's part of the offering we have there.
Absolutely. It's crazy time of year. I mean, this is Dynasty season, right? So it's fun time of year, fun time to dive into Dynasty content. And obviously DLF is legendary in the fantasy space. Let's dive into your background and learn a little bit more about your journey that led to you getting involved in fantasy sports. So where did it all begin? Where did your love for sports begin?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up a sports fan. My dad was a big sports fan, not football so much actually though. So I didn't really grow up as a football fan. I grew up in Kentucky and still live there in Kentucky. So it was college basketball and it was baseball for me growing up. Big Kentucky Wildcats fan, big Yankees, New York Yankees fan. So those were really kind of my two teams that I focused on throughout childhood and really into adulthood, into my college years and beyond. So football, it was kind of slow coming around for me and a love for football and for fantasy football.
So with baseball, like what was the connection with the Yankees coming from Kentucky? You
Right.
had to choose somebody, right?
Well, yeah, that one got passed down. That's kind of, it's a little bit of a fun story, I guess. So, my dad growing up in the 50s and 60s, of course, baseball was king obviously then, and he was one of five, all boys. So five brothers. And I mean, they were so competitive, like many brothers are. They were all baseball fans, but they refused to cheer for the same team. So basically, each brother picked a different team. There was a Red Sox fan, Dodgers fan, Reds fan. My dad was the Yankees fan, and passed that down to me. So there were some rough years. If you're a baseball fan, the Yankees from the 80s and early 90s. It was a few rough years before things turned around.
True, but you definitely overall got the 101 in that draft.
Yeah, I feel good about that. Mostly at least.
Mostly. But yeah, so growing up, who were your favorite athletes, growing up, across the sports landscape, whether it was, some of those Kentucky basketball days or even the Yankees?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was Yankees. Like I said, that was kind of my number one. I mean, I would follow football a little bit, obviously would watch the playoffs or the Super Bowl, but wasn't really a big football fan at all until my young adult years. Baseball, I was a Don Mattingly guy. So, yeah. I mean, my Twitter handle is Ryan Mick 23, and the 23 is Don Mattingly, not Michael Jordan or not any football player that might wear that number. So yeah, Don Mattingly for me, and then I mean, really anybody that's suited up for Kentucky, certainly.
I love it. Yeah, my first favorite player, it didn't last too long, but I was a lefty. It was Don Mattingly for nice. A couple seasons. Sure. My brother, in Seattle, just randomly, he chose the Red Sox. He was a massive Wade Boggs fan, so I naturally was like, I'm a Mattingly guy. So
that was the rivalry there for 2 or 3 years at least.
I love it. So do you remember like any of your biggest like heartbreaks as a sports fan, or even like your favorite memory as a sports fan?
I mean, heartbreaks. So Kentucky basketball, it's got to start there. They had some rough years, mostly brought upon themselves, and nearly got the death penalty back in the late 80s, and then in the 90s started getting good again. Right, hired a coach, had some recruits, and then the 92 game, the Grant Hill to Christian Laettner. I don't know if you remember that, but if you've watched any college basketball at all, you've seen that highlight. And it was not a highlight for us. It was a low light, but that was certainly the biggest heartbreak from a sports fandom standpoint is losing that game with 2.3 seconds left.
Yeah, that was that's hard because you're going to see that clip for the rest of your life. For people excited about what happened with Laettner. But on your end, who was your guy? It was
Jamal Mashburn was our best player on that
Jamal
team.
Mashburn, yep, I remember it. Vividly. That was a big one. How about your favorite moment as a sports fan? Like growing up, like what was the one moment that you think back as like the greatest moment you remember?
Yeah, I'd probably have to dip into my college years for really success from, if I'm focusing on those two teams as a fan. The Yankees won the 96 World Series. That was their first World Series win that, since I started cheering for them, basically. So that was the big one for me. And, they had some success since then, certainly, and Kentucky has as well. And other teams I've started to follow and players I've started to follow. But yeah, the 96 World Series, I was in college, and that was, that was kind of what I'd been waiting for.
There you go. I love that. All your brothers were jealous at that time.
Yeah.
Or all your uncles,
my uncles,
I guess.
right.
Your uncles, it's your uncles, right? So when did you decide that you wanted to be a teacher?
Yeah, that was pretty early on, actually. It was like middle school. I had a great teacher in seventh grade math, and I think that's a common story for a lot of teachers and a lot of people in general, that you have that one teacher that made a big impact. And that's what happened for me. Kind of changed the way I viewed math, and changed the way I viewed, ultimately the rest of my life. I wanted to do what he did. So, started teaching elementary school, and taught mostly third grade for about 20 years, and just over the past few years has made that shift to PE, elementary PE. So that's still a little bit new to me, but it's obviously been a blast getting to have fun with the kids. And I have become the favorite teacher in my school, and I recognize it has nothing to do with me, right? It's everybody wants to go to PE, everybody wants to to play those games and let loose a little bit. So yeah, it's a fun time for sure.
Yeah, PE teachers do have an advantage when it comes to getting the best out of the kids, right? But no, it is
That's
true.
right.
Like, obviously the impact the teacher can have on, inspiring, the kids. I mean, that's a good story. I love that.
Yeah.
So when along your journey did you discover fantasy sports?
That was actually early in my teaching career. I've been at the same school for 25 years now, and being in elementary school, it's mostly females. And my first couple years teaching there was just a couple of us men teachers, and so we kind of formed a friendship, or I formed a friendship with another guy there, and shared lunches and chatted sports and all those things. And he would tell me about this fantasy football league he was in. And other than kind of being slightly familiar with it, I didn't have any experience, had never really done that. But the descriptions that he was talking about, drafting and making trades, and just having that interaction with college buddies, and that was his way to stay close to his college friends. That all sounded great to me. And I just remember almost begging him, get me in this fantasy football league, which feels crazy now. Of course, there were, even then, we're talking 20 years ago, there were other ways to find a fantasy football league, but I didn't know about those ways then. So I was just waiting for this one opportunity in this one fantasy football league that I knew of. And eventually that opportunity came. They opened up a couple teams, actually did a expansion draft of sorts, so I didn't replace the team. I was just a add-on, and that was my first fantasy football league. It was a Dynasty League, was my first one, and it was a wild experience. Not necessarily run the way that you or I might run it now, but it was fun, and obviously was good enough to hook me.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. So you started with Dynasty. That's wild.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
was it? You said that you developed a love for football. Like later on, did it coincide with fantasy, or did you start picking up on football a little bit earlier than that?
Yeah, I think I was certainly watching, more football than maybe I did growing up. Just as as a college kid or as a young adult, was definitely watching more games and becoming more of a fan in general. But yeah, once getting involved in fantasy and kind of starting that ball rolling, it obviously grew exponentially from there.
So what did you love most about like your early experiences playing fantasy? What was it? Just the camaraderie with your pals?
Well, honestly, not really, because those were not people I was familiar with. These are my coworkers' friends and college friends, and not people I knew outside of the the fantasy league, outside of the computer, really.
Right.
To me, it was just the team building aspect, right? The drafting, trading, grabbing the guy off the waiver wire before anyone else could. And like I said, that was enough to really hook me. It was reminiscent of what I'd grown up and what so many of us have grown up doing, playing franchise mode on Madden or on other video games, not even playing the game, but just doing the off-season moves. And that's what it was to me. And that's what I loved about it.
Roster construction. That's
Yeah.
that's definitely an addicting thing. So do you have one league that you consider like your main home primary league?
Not really. I am in a home league now, with some, some real life friends, I guess you could say, but that actually even came later after some of the other leagues I'm in. So no, I'm in several leagues still, almost all Dynasty, but not one I would consider my main league. I do have a home league, but it doesn't get the majority of my attention.
Sure. So you got a ton of industry leagues, I'm sure.
Sure.
Who's your biggest rival? Like one person across industry leagues that like you got to beat that person when you're playing them.
Oh man, that's a tough one. Probably my best friendship in this industry is Dan Myler, who's the co-host on the DLF podcast with DLF Dynasty podcast with me. We share a lot of teams in different leagues, so kind of pick each other's brain doing that. But we're also competing against each other in several other leagues. So I guess he's the one I would say. I don't necessarily consider him my rival, but I sure want to beat him, and I'm sure he would say the same thing.
When he arrives on that schedule, it perks your interest a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you enjoy most about commissioning leagues?
I think for me, it's really, I come up with an idea of something I want to see in a league or I want to try. And rather than finding a league that already has that feature or that might include that, I just do it myself. Right. I mean, I had an idea for something called a second chance draft, which this was 10 years ago, probably something like that. And basically it was a dispersal draft, but it gave current managers the chance to throw all their assets back and get a fresh start. You got a bad team, things didn't go your way, rather than quitting the league and just giving up, do the second chance draft. Maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 other teams doing the same thing. So I started an entire league just to try that rule, and it worked pretty well. And in fact, it worked really well. We still use it in all of my leagues today. So it's been years and years of that kind of stuff, like having an idea, wanting to try it, and just doing it myself.
Well, yeah, for anybody that's listened to Commission Impossible, you know exactly, you that sounds familiar because you guys are always talking about creative ways to make leagues fun but really getting into settings and formats and experimentation. So always cool listening to that from my perspective. Obviously, I love the commission thing as well. For you, do you have any favorite like last place punishments or ways to determine draft order, creative things like that just make leagues extra fun?
We've never done any punishments. I love seeing it seems like you hear about those things, around Christmas, New Year's, whenever the leagues are kind of wrapping up, you see those on Twitter or on TikTok or whatever. And those are always fun to see. I've never done any myself, so I can't really speak to that. I don't know. It kind of feels like more of a redraft thing.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, the Scott Fishbowl might be my only redraft league. It's definitely my only consistent redraft league. So, some of those things I kind of miss out on from a commission, from a player standpoint, even.
Well, I mean, you're dedicated to the Dynasty, so that's
that's true.
All the respect in the world to that. That's pretty awesome. What are your favorite like settings within Dynasty? Again, it's it's endless what you can do, but are there certain formats or settings that you really love?
More and more I've been loving vampire leagues. I don't know if you've gotten the chance to do any of those yet. Still somewhat of a new concept. I guess the last 4 or 5 years that's really kind of grown a little bit, but I've tried more and more of those and tried ways to alter those and adjust those and even turn them into, what is a dynasty version of that look like? But essentially you have one team who is not participating in the draft. Even if you're doing a startup draft in a dynasty league, would not participate or would be at some kind of big disadvantage. Maybe you don't pick in the first 20 rounds. You only get the last few, something like that. And then what happens is that team, if they beat one of the other teams, one of the regular teams, they get to steal a player from that team. So it's just certainly a different kind of roster building. But the challenge of being the vampire team, it's tough. The first year is very rough. If you win 1 or 2 games, you're celebrating, but the stakes feel a little bit different in those types of leagues, and really just in some ways become the league that I'm focused most on Sundays is checking that score over and over and hoping I'm somehow winning, even with a poor roster.
Yeah, it's all so cool. I mean, for diehard fantasy people that just love playing the game and like to, add in new things, stuff like that is great. So Vampire Leagues, I first played in the Guillotine recently, Guillotine League recently. It's so much fun to have. It's a little something different, but it definitely keeps your attention when you got something new like that. I love that. So what do you love most about Dynasty? I'm sure you're going to say the roster construction, all that, but what do you love most about it? And are you surprised with the growth? Because there's definitely been a surge in the popularity.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing that. I'm sure. I'm sure everyone else is as well. Just as far as far as the numbers, a number of leagues, number of, if you're working for a site, you're seeing those general numbers increase consistently, which is great. I think anything that you're involved with, or you're a big fan of, you want to see it continue to grow. And I definitely think Dynasty is. As far as my affinity for Dynasty, it's just the year-round aspect, right? I mean, it's this time of year, March, April, May, and maybe your typical football fan, certainly just your average football watcher on Sunday is not thinking about fantasy football this time of year, even with the draft just a couple weeks away now. But I mean, early on, I got hooked, and even in these off-season months, it was something that I was focused on and thinking about really all the time, and wanted to continue to grow that. So this, becoming involved at DLF and, just kind of growing my role there obviously helped me to do that.
No, for sure, for sure. So what are your current tendencies and strategies with roster construction, and how you approach the game? Has that changed over the years?
Yeah, it absolutely has. Early on, I wrote an article called Productive Struggle, and essentially suggesting give up that first year of Dynasty, right? It basically tank in year one, get some extra draft picks, get as many young players as you can. Don't worry about running backs really at all, right? Just load up on those players that are going to gain value. And that's how I played the game. And at that point, and that kind of took off and has almost become kind of part of the language of Dynasty now, is that people try that strategy, which is very cool. I've kind of actually gone away from it in my own leagues now. And part of the reason is I play in so many auction leagues now. And going back to the settings question, that would certainly be one of my favorite settings. Is I prefer auction leagues to drafts. And honestly, it's much tougher to do Productive Struggle in an auction league because the veterans go for so cheap. It's tough to pass those veterans up. And it's the complete opposite. You're seeing the younger players who might have a 4th or 5th round ADP in a startup draft, priced way up in those startup auctions. So really just the format of the auction has kind of dictated a change in strategy, pushing me to a little bit more of, I wouldn't say a win now, but at least a balanced approach.
Nice. Yeah, things change over the years. You have to adapt, and obviously you've done that. You learn a lot of lessons along the way, I'm sure. So when did you first start creating fantasy content? When did it all begin, and what inspired you to start diving in?
I just feel like whether it was that first league I joined, and then I found, again, we're talking nearly 20 years ago, I guess, I found message boards and stumbled onto Football Guys, which was a big deal at that point. Still is a big deal, of course. But whether it was a message board or just my own leagues that I was in, I found myself always being the most active one in the league, right? I was posting in that shark pool all the time at Football Guys. And then when Twitter came along, in 2009, 2010, whatever it might be, same thing. I kind of jump in that community and transition there, and was super active there from the start. And honestly, was just so active that in 2012, DLF reached out and said, would you like to join our team as a writer? And I'd done a little bit of content creation. I mean, we're talking just a couple of articles here and there. But nothing of substance really. But I was interested in joining the team and kind of continuing to build that. And that's what happened. Became a writer for DLF in 2012. Actually just had my 12-year anniversary just last week. So here we go.
There you go. Congratulations. That's pretty
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you.
Yeah, you've done obviously a lot over the years. One thing is you got the Commission Impossible deal with Scott Fish. When did you first connect with Scott Fish?
Again, we were aware of each other, obviously, just through Twitter and interacting there. Figured out that we both had that, that love of commissioning leagues, starting leagues, and kind of a shared passion there. Obviously, he had the Scott Fish Bowl, which was, growing so much, so fast. We're talking back like SFB 4, 5, 6 range. So honestly, we just started interacting through Twitter. We got in some leagues together. He just like me, he was a fan of, starting kind of unusual leagues or leagues that had some twist to them. So we would always talk about that and kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And then, just, had so many shared interests that we became fast friends.
And then obviously, you kicked off some podcasts together and all that. Yep. You did a lot of help with SFB over the years. Mm-hmm. What was your role with that? Like over the years, like what were you doing behind the scenes to help SFB?
Yeah, my role there has grown as well over the years. Mainly just trying to help, honestly, kind of being the right-hand man to Scott. Whatever he needed, I would try to do. Sending invites, setting up the actual leagues once we're ready for that point. As much as it's grown over the years, obviously it's become more and more of a task to send invites, to get people set up, and just kind of those things you would do as a commissioner. Maybe you're doing it for 11 or 12 other teams. We're doing it for thousands of teams. So it's crazy to say it's a lot of work, but it is a lot of work for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like it's grown so much, especially these last few years. Like, definitely need a whole team these days to get everything going. And then with Fantasy Cares taking off and all that, it's
right.
It's great to see. Obviously, I know you've been a big part of that over the years. What's your favorite part of what you're doing in the industry right now?
My role, I feel like my role has changed a little bit. That has to do with the changes at DLF and the sale of the site there. And I'd recently, I guess at the end of the year, I stepped away from a podcast that I'd done for years and years, had started Dynasty Blueprint with Matt Williamson. That eventually became Locked On Dynasty. We had a great team there, and honestly, it just became too much. Not the podcast specifically, but kind of everything. And if you follow me on Twitter, if you follow me closely on Twitter, you'll probably notice I'm not quite as active lately, just as far as the volume of tweets or maybe even the volume of articles or podcasts being produced. And it just kind of became evident that I needed to slow down and step back a little bit, kind of get priorities in order. So honestly, the step back is my favorite part, that I'm still producing content. I'm still plugged in, but just doing it with more life balance right now.
Yeah. Balance is obviously it's key. There's certain, phases in life and seasons in life where you can obviously get a little bit more unbalanced, for the good, but obviously it's great to know that you're finding that right now. What has been the most difficult challenge for you, like during this whole time, this career? Has it just been like carrying all the different hats and having a professional career outside of a career where everyone else thinks that you're, full time, right?
Yeah. I get that a lot. I remember years ago when I did become partner or part owner at DLF, and there was an announcement and mentioned it on Twitter, and a lot of the responses were, "Oh, I thought you already owned DLF," or "I thought you started DLF," which is, that's flattering that I was given that credit, but that's not the case. But I felt like for years and years I worked so hard in the fantasy space that it it felt like I was full-time. It felt like a full-time job, but I mean, the reality is it was a second full-time job in addition to my teaching job. And I was also doing some coaching there throughout the years, not currently, but in previous years doing some coaching. And I have 3 kids and I have a wife, and that just the balance of all of those, and honestly, having an imbalance to those things was the biggest challenge. And I feel like right now, maybe for the first time in years, I actually have a pretty good balance, or at least I have the more important things in the right place now.
That's wonderful to hear. I love that. So what's been the most rewarding part of your time in the fantasy space?
I mean, it's absolutely friendships, relationships. I mentioned Dan Myler earlier. Eric Dickens is the name I mentioned. Matt Price. Mostly DLF guys. Those are the ones I'm more exposed to and have more time with. But we get together as often as we can. We do an NFL draft kind of get together. So obviously that's coming up soon. Getting to hang out with some of those folks, and whether it's interacting on Twitter or in person or on podcast or whatever it might be at the FF Expo. Just those friendships, relationships are so valuable to me.
Yeah, I mean, the fantasy football community it's pretty amazing. It's wild to see like what it's become over the years, and obviously there's different influxes of creators and whatnot. I mean, you have like the COVID era, a big surge of people coming in, but people that go way, way, way back too. And you talking about like getting on Twitter in 2008, like it's a whole different world of some of the old Mike Clay's, right? Like back in the day, really, obviously Sigmund Bloom, like so many people back in the day. Matt Harmon was kind of early on too, getting on there. So many people, you've seen it all. It's awesome, but the community is so great. And the expo, you bring that up. That's such a special event. It's great, seeing you there. Are you planning on going back this year?
Yep. I'll be there.
Okay.
Wouldn't miss it. Certainly one of the events of the year from a fantasy standpoint. And absolutely, I'll be there.
I love it. Obviously the one thing that brings everybody together is a passion for football, passion for fantasy sports. We, like I said earlier, it's a crazy time of year. It's a fun time of year, especially if you love the NFL draft. All these prospects, we don't know where they're landing spots. Like everyone wants to know, like where their favorite prospects are going to be. For you, are there any players in this draft class that you just can't wait to find out where they land?
It's such a unique year because I feel like at the quarterback spot, at the wide receiver spot, certainly at tight end, we've got these guys that are locked in as the top options, it seems. But at quarterback and wide receiver, obviously, some other potential superstars, nipping on their heels. I mean, I find myself really being interested in if you're talking about the top guys, Rome Odunze from Washington. Obviously Harrison, Neighbors, exciting as well. But Rome Odunze is kind of my he's not my wide receiver one, but he's my favorite wide receiver in the class, if that makes sense. Among the top guys, he's the one I'm most interested in. It's a little scary. You look at mock drafts and he's projected to be a top 10, 12 pick. And there's a lot of rough landing spots, a lot of landmines in that top 10 or so. So, we'll see what draft week brings.
Where would you like to see him? Do you want to see him like at Chicago paired up with Caleb Williams? Does that intrigue you, or are there other spots that you'd like to see him?
Yeah, I mean, Chicago is intriguing, certainly, but obviously they've got some talent there. So
they do.
I mean, I think whoever it feels like whoever lands in Chicago, if they do go with a rookie receiver and with that 9th pick or even later in the draft, it feels like it could be a Jackson Smith and Jigba situation.
That's
right?
What I was just going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, JSN, we loved him. He was everybody's wide receiver one. Even when he goes to Seattle, he was still the wide receiver one. We probably should have, factored in situation a little bit more than we did. So yeah, I'm a little worried about Chicago, but I mean, Tennessee, the Giants, they're in that range and need receivers as well. I don't think those are necessarily good spots. I mean, Arizona at their 4, I believe, 4 or 5. Arizona and the Chargers feel like great landing spots. So if that's Neighbors and Harrison, we're great, but that leaves Odunze in a tough spot potentially.
It'll be fun. Whatever happens, draft is always fun. You got any deeper sleepers that you're excited to see where they end up?
Man, maybe it's just the time of year, and maybe we're overanalyzing as we get close to the NFL draft. But this class, from a dynasty standpoint, feels so deep. I do these mock drafts. I do 20 rookie mock drafts every single month, and I'm making 3rd round picks and 4th round picks and really just loving the options down there. So, I'm looking at our current ADP at DLF. Javon Baker's a 3rd rounder, the receiver from Central Florida. Ray Davis, my guy from Kentucky, a running back that I like and a lot of people like. And, these names that are honestly pretty big names, if you're a college football fan, at least, that are going to be 3rd rounders, 4th rounders, maybe even. Will Shipley, Clemson running back. And I don't even think it's fair to call these guys sleepers. It just shows the depth of the class right now.
Yeah, it seems like a great class. I'm in a dynasty league that it's a complete rebuild. I think I have like 17 picks in the draft. So nice, I'm with you where I'm like in the 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round. I'm like, hey, these are the guys I want. This is great.
Yeah.
I think I have 4 first round picks. So I'll let you know how it turns out. I'm excited.
You're in a good spot for sure.
It's a good year to load up. I think we'll see.
Yep.
Let's dive into some rapid fire questions. I'll just throw out some questions. Let me know what first comes to mind. Obviously, it doesn't have to be a rapid fire answer, but what first comes to mind when I say, what should someone who's interested in playing Dynasty consider? Like, why should they consider playing Dynasty?
I always say if your fantasy season ends, if you're in a redraft league and it ends, and you find yourself missing playing fantasy football, right? If the NFL playoffs are on, or if it's January, if it's February, and you miss fantasy football, you should be in a dynasty league. If you're a big fan of the NFL draft, obviously you should be in a dynasty league. Absolutely. And if you're tracking free agency and every single move that is made, you should be in a dynasty league. So those are kind of the signs that I always focus on.
I think that's the perfect trio of questions. Like that is spot on. Like that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
When should a trade be vetoed in fantasy football?
Rarely. We've got to have collusion here, right? We've got to have basically known cheating between two sides. Other than that, I'm letting the managers manage the teams the way they want. We obviously see some bad trades, some questionable trades that I might not make, that you might not make, but unless something funny's going on, you're right. Unless there's more to the story, I'm letting it go. And that really goes back to bringing quality managers into your league, especially if you're talking dynasty. That the goal is to have these people, together for years, potentially. Everybody's got to try it the first time, right? Everybody's going to be a first-time dynasty player at some point, but hopefully you're getting people that have a good grasp on how to play the game. They're willing to do some kind of research. They're looking at DLF or another dynasty resource to find out values of players.
Good answer. How about trade deadline? Should there be one in a dynasty league?
Oh, this one's going to get me in trouble. I go back and forth on this one, honestly. Just last year, we removed the trade deadline in my 5 kitchen sink leagues that I run, that are auction and Devy and contract and everything else, hence the kitchen sink name. We removed the deadline, but we kept what I call a soft trade deadline. So we kept the date in place. You can trade beyond that date, but you've got to pay for the next year. So you've got to, you've got to commit to sticking with the league beyond that current season. And if you do that, then you can keep trading, beyond that date and into the playoffs even.
I like that. That's really good. What are your favorite ways to increase engagement in a fantasy league?
Well, I think that's why I love these kitchen sink leagues. They are contract leagues, so there's stuff to do really, really almost all season. We kind of take it slow during the fantasy or during the NFL playoffs, but once February, March rolls around, we're doing that second chance auction that I mentioned earlier with our new managers, as well as anybody else that wants to throw their team back. Now that April's here, we're doing restricted free agency. Obviously, we'll have a rookie auction next month. We'll have an unrestricted free agent auction, then we'll have a Devy auction coming up later in the summer. So the idea of a contract league, especially if it's an auction, opens up so many possibilities. You have something to do almost every single month of the off season. And not only does it encourage activity, it basically requires activity if you're going to be successful in those leagues. So that's the easy answer. If you're talking about a vanilla dynasty league, it's much tougher.
It can be for sure, but your answer right there, I mean, it gave me chills just thinking about. I love how complex you get with your leagues and how dedicated you are. I admire that a ton. I think it's awesome. What are your favorite hobbies and activities outside of sports?
Yeah, I'm pretty boring. Movies, TV, hang out with my family, obviously. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Outside of, other sports, I'm a sports fan in general. So gearing up for the Masters here later this week, and all the sports, all the family stuff, all the kind of general entertainment movies. I'm trying to keep up with all those things.
No, I mean that'll keep it all filled up for sure.
Yes.
What's your favorite all-time TV show?
Oh, I loved The Shield. Did you ever see that on the cop show, the bad cop show? That's my favorite.
Okay. How about an all-time favorite movie?
Memento would be up there for sure. Usual Suspects, it would be on the list as well. Anything where you're trying to solve some kind of mystery or figure something out.
Okay. How about a favorite sports movie?
Moneyball. I love Moneyball.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell you. I think Scott Hatterberg is like my. I think our grandparents were brothers. How about that?
Oh, nice. Yeah.
In fact, I do have a funny story off of that. It's funny. I went to baseball camp. I went to Stottlemyre baseball camp. You obviously know the Stottlemyres, right?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah. As a kid, like it was in Yakima, Washington. I'd go out to Stottlemyre baseball camp, and I came home one week or after the week one time one year. And I told my mom, hey, our counselor from last year, he's like playing in the Pan Am games. Like he's like on some American team or national team. And she's like, oh yeah. And I said his name. No, I showed her a picture. I said his name. And she's like, wait a second. I think we got cousins. You have cousins back there. I think I know exactly. I think he's your cousin. And it was Scott Hatterberg.
Oh wow.
And then long story short, it was funny to kind of find that connection, then to see him, play his full career in the end, and then to see him in Moneyball, to see that being portrayed in Moneyball is pretty funny.
Yeah, that's nice. That's awesome.
How about a favorite band, musician, or artist for you?
I grew up on the Beastie Boys, and haven't found anybody that I like more than that. So I'll stick with them.
I love that. That's great. How about a favorite place to vacation?
Again, we're pretty boring. We're a Disney family. My wife is a Disney vacation planner. My wife loves it. The kids love it. I love all of them. So we're Disney people. Pretty boring, but the kiddos love it, of course.
Yeah, of course. And that's the phase of life you're in, obviously. Yeah. It's wonderful. I've spent countless hours trolling the parks in Disney over the years with our 11-year-old daughter. Now we've been multiple times, and it's so much magic. So I love that.
Oh yeah.
What's your favorite charity outside of Fantasy Cares?
Yeah, so there's a local charity here in Louisville. My youngest, who I talk about occasionally on Twitter. Grayson has Down syndrome, and a local spot called Down Syndrome of Louisville does great work for that community, supporting Grayson and everyone else like him with, so many events and offerings. So yeah, any chance I get, that's the charity I support.
That's wonderful. What are you most grateful for at this time in your life?
I mean, it's got to be my family. And, I kind of hinted at it earlier that the priorities are a little out of whack though. At one point I was probably too much time, on fantasy football and trying to figure out these rookie rankings and some of this stuff. And, just valuing time with my family.
It's the perfect answer. And I love that
Yep.
for you. How about some of the people over the years that have had just a huge impact on your career in fantasy and in life?
I mean, so many, and so many that have had exactly the way you said, an impact not only on the fantasy side of it, but my life in general. And a lot of the names I've already mentioned. Obviously, Scott Fish, great friendship, and I mean, we can all, admire and what he's done and what he continues to do. So certainly Scott, Eric Dickens, I mentioned, gave me my shot, right? Got my foot in the door at DLF, and I was able to, with his help and with the help of others, grow it from there. And then Dan Myler, Matt Price, names I've mentioned, Matt Williamson, who, when he called and said, "Hey, I'm leaving ESPN. I did a football podcast every single day there. And I want to keep doing a podcast, but I want to do a dynasty podcast." And I mean, right now there's dozens, maybe 100 dynasty podcasts out there. But at that time, there weren't too many. So the idea of that, and outside of a few guest spots, I'd never done a podcast. I was not on the DLF podcast. We were not doing Commission Possible or any of those things. So, Dynasty Blueprint was my first one from a hosting standpoint. And he, his invitation and his idea to start that made a huge impact on my fantasy football career.
That's awesome. Always love to hear that kind of stuff. What advice do you have for people that are aspiring to get more involved in creating fantasy content?
Yeah, my answer to that, whenever I'm asked, is just be active. And like I said, I was the most active in a lot of ways, at leagues and on message boards and on Twitter. So, based on some previous answers, I would say be active, but have that life balance as well. So I was probably too active. It helped to grow my role. It helped to, get a nice follower count, whatever that matters, whatever that's worth. But like I said, I was probably too active there for a while.
Yeah, no, it's great advice for sure. What advice do you have for commissioners? Like, either people that are afraid to take on the duties of being a commissioner, or for commissioners that want to just get more out of the fantasy experience?
I would say come up with kind of your own twist on things, whether it's a new rule, something you want to try, like I mentioned earlier, but just come up with something that separates you, and just have fun with it is the most important.
So, and with those kitchen sink leagues, can you describe that just a little bit when it comes to all the different things you got thrown in those?
Yeah. So these started, 10 years ago as well. Yeah, quite a while ago. And basically, there were a lot of different settings I liked. I had done some auction leagues, which I enjoyed. I had a couple leagues that were Devy that I enjoyed. I was in one contract league, which was challenging to me at the time. Didn't necessarily have a great grasp on it then, but liked the idea of it. And I mean, it was as simple as, what if there was one league that had all of this? And I do get some pushback from our IDP friends sometimes for calling it the kitchen sink, because it does not have IDP. So maybe everything but the kitchen sink, or everything but IDP. But yeah, that was the idea, is like, let's get as many of these features as we can into one league. And some of them were unique at the time, or not necessarily unique, but not as common. I mean, even Superflex, tight end premium, those things were not the norm like they might be viewed now. I mean, we have weekly double headers. That's a little bit of a twist, but really just kind of try to find as many ways as possible to make those leagues stand out and just to make them more challenging and more fun.
I think it's fun. I mean, and for commissioners, that are looking to spice things up. I mean, a guy like Ryan McDowell, he knows his stuff. Make sure that you're following him. But just be creative is bottom line, right? Like, try interesting things. Certain things might not stick, but make it fun. And if the league's having fun, most people are going to be on board just to kind of go along the ride. And I think that a fun league like that definitely keeps people engaged. So great stuff, Ryan, for sure. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else you want to share before we close it out?
Just thanks for having me on. I've enjoyed these pods from you. I've caught most of them, I think, and it's been fun getting to kind of see the other side of some of the people you follow on Twitter or you see on videos or hear on podcasts. So I love this series we've been in.
Thrilled to have you on. It's you're someone that I've wanted to have on for so long, and I think that it's just fun. I love celebrating the game of fantasy football and the people behind it, the resources out there. I just love to help share those. So thanks for being a part of it. Can you share with the viewers, the listeners, where to find you on Twitter, X, and where your content can be discovered?
Sure. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. You can find all of my work at dynastyleaguefootball.com and check out the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm a co-host on that as well. And Commission Impossible with Scott Fish.
There you go. Thank you so much for joining me, Ryan. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here. I can't wait to see what's next for you in 2024. I can't wait to see you in Canton, Ohio this August.
That's right. See you, Kev.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.